For the second consecutive week, Michigan commenced a Big Ten West Saturday slaughter. My key takeaway for the Wolverines is their depth. On offense and defense, they've got a lot of it.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
When I was recapping that Michigan-Nebraska game last week, I said, man, I couldn't think of a worse start than the Huskers got themselves in, right, getting down 14-0. Well, Minnesota might have topped that. Right away, a pick six right out of the gate thrown by Ethan Kaliakmanis, returned back to the house in front of the Gopher faithful by Michigan defensive back Will Johnson. At that moment, this game was over. This game was over almost immediately, right? Almost when they were coming out onto the field. Throughout the week, I was looking all throughout this game, and I couldn't really find anything for Minnesota. Michigan was that strong, and Minnesota has gotten to that point where when you face off against an elite team like Michigan, there's not a lot of places, and in some cases, there's no places where you can find any sort of anything that Minnesota can any sort of matchup that the Gophers really can try to flip to their advantage. Let's talk about the depth of the Michigan Wolverines, because that might be the greatest strength of this maize and blue squad right now. Let's start on the offense and talk about their depth right now, because when you talk about this passing game, they can ride the hot hand. There's not necessarily a superstar that really stands above the rest in terms of pass catchers right now. Roman Wilson, I believe, has been the overall best receiver for Michigan this season. Doesn't mean Cornelius Johnson can't get involved. It doesn't mean Colston Loveland. Colston Loveland wasn't targeted a ton early in this game, but then he broke through eventually with a touchdown. There's so many different directions that they can go. Of course, the main targets that you're going to look at are Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, Colston Loveland at tight end, but they've really mixed in Donovan Edwards a lot more in this passing game. He seemed to be more involved in the receiving game than he is in the rush game. That's really pushed more towards Blake Corum, at least this early in the season. Then you look at Morris, you look at Samaj Morgan that you can throw in there as well. And it's JJ McCarthy's ability. Like, you can have all of these receivers on this team, but it's JJ McCarthy's ability to go out there and find him. And I think that tandem with JJ's ability with the depth in the pass catchers that Michigan has, I really think that's a great tandem. And that depth, they're going to ride the hot hand. Okay, one day, some days Roman Wilson is going to have a huge game. Some days Cornelius Johnson is going to have a good game. Some days Colston Loveland at tight end might find some good matchups against linebackers and safeties, and he might explode for 7 catches, 150, and a couple of scores. That could very well happen, and this is just how they're going to do it, because Michigan plays their way, right? JJ McCarthy threw the ball, 20 times in this game? I was saying during this game, he could light up Minnesota for 350 or 400 yards if they played Pac-12 style football. But they don't. This team isn't going to put up crazy numbers. None of these guys on this team are going to get Heisman hype, because that's not how Michigan plays. This Michigan team isn't really fit to have a Heisman campaign. They're fit to win physical football games within the Big Ten Conference. That's what Michigan is fit for on the offensive. Let's talk about the defensive depth right now. A lot of people, including myself, have talked about the depth on the defensive line. And I think you really saw in this game, you've seen it in other games, but I really saw it in this game where they were constantly getting pressure with those folks on their defensive line, with those 3 guys, those 4 guys, however they lined it up front against Minnesota. And I kind of talked about this in my Iowa-Purdue reaction, how Iowa was able to get a lot of pressure with just their defensive line, how that opens up so many other things on your defense, what you do with the linebackers, what you do with the corners and safeties in the defensive backfield. It opens so many things, because now if you need to take away linebackers and you need to bring in an extra, you need to bring 6 guys, 7 guys, whatever it be, to get pressure on the quarterback, now you're kind of taking things away and you kind of have to adjust in terms of your pass coverage back there. But it's a great Michigan pass rush. It's a great Michigan defense. And when they can rotate a bunch of guys, 8 guys, 9 guys throughout the defensive line, they are always fresh. always fresh, and that is so key from a pass rushing standpoint. And to get different guys with different skill sets. I saw some guys, they just put your arm into you and they bull rush you. Some guys use speed and quickness, use their hands and swim moves and rips to get free. And when you kind of put different guys, offensive tackles and pass protection has to prepare for these different guys and their different skill sets in their pass rushing ability for Michigan. It's the depth. This team, because of their depth, will suck the life out of you. They are a boa constrictor. They wrap around you and they're always fresh. So they're going to be given 100% this whole game. And the other team, they get wore down because they don't have the depth and the depth of talent that the Michigan Wolverines do. Let's talk about the Minnesota Golden Gophers. This was a team that was running the ball decent in the first half. You had Zach Evans and Bryce Williams averaging 4.25 yards per carry in the first half. And like I said, as this game wears on, you've seen it a couple of times. You've seen it times for Michigan here so far this season. They are a team that really excels in the second half because of their depth, guys always remaining fresh. You know, when you're riding Evans and Williams and you're riding this run game like Minnesota does and they want to do, eventually they're going to wear down. And that's exactly what happened more in the second half. You know, when I look at this from a Minnesota standpoint, their passing game is concerning to me right now. Because you got a guy in Ethan Kaliakmanis, you look at his 2 pick sixes, those were both on Ethan. We're not talking tip balls, we're not talking drop passes that somehow the ball lands into the hands of a defender. Those were on Ethan Kaliakmanis. We're 6 games into this season. Where does Minnesota have their eyes right now in terms of the future? Because, at least from my perspective, I thought Ethan Kaliakmanis would be better at this point in the season. I know, and I've said this before, because I think this is twofold. There's multiple layers to the struggles of Minnesota on offense, and specifically their passing game, and why they're still so dependent on this run game. Now, that's kind of the way PJ wants to play, but they don't have a star receiver. They're really missing Chris Autman-Bell, has not played at all through 6 games this season. Daniel Jackson is probably their closest thing to a playmaker. They don't have receivers right now that can separate. I really thought guys transfers like Corey Crooms and Elijah Spencer would really step up in this throughout this season as well. It just hasn't happened. I thought that there would be multiple targets on the perimeter, and they would get a lot of them involved, right? We talk about the depth in the passing game and the pass catchers for Michigan. I thought to a much lesser extent, though, we would see kind of the same thing for Minnesota, and Ethan Kaliakmanis would be better because he has a lot of talent on the perimeter. That just hasn't happened because I don't think these receivers and these pass catchers for the Gophers are as good, and they're not separating as much as we originally thought they would here coming into the season. Ethan was 5 of 15, 52 yards. We mentioned the 2 pick sixes as well. So if they can't get Chris Autman-Bell back this season, I think they're going to struggle to create things in the pass game. And then you got to look towards the future, right? I get it. Ethan is a young quarterback. I know he kind of took over the back half of last season after Tanner Morgan went down. But what does the future hold? I think that is a honest and serious question. Is this a team that as we go, we know like the backs, Zach Evans is good. We know Darius Taylor is good. If you can keep them both in Dinkytown, you got to feel really good about your run game. But you got to supplement that with a quarterback. Do they start at least things and thoughts creep into their mind where they're maybe considering a transfer portal addition next year to try to bolster that quarterback position if they can? The development of Ethan, maybe. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. Like, I think he's better than a handful of quarterbacks right now in this conference. I just think for a variety of reasons, it just hasn't worked out for him so far this season. And maybe things will get better as we kind of go along in this season, and maybe he can get some semblance of confidence against some of these Big Ten West opponents, but I just don't know. I thought he looked good in the Northwestern game, but we all know what happened in the fourth quarter of that matchup. I think there's big questions right now for the Minnesota Golden Gophers going forward. Right now, as I look at them, this is not a bowl team. And at the beginning of the season, I thought they were a bowl team. So I think they've definitely regressed in terms of my views on them as the season has really gone along. You got to be happy, at least from a Gopher standpoint, what you have in the run game and what you were kind of able to do in this game, at least kind of earlier in the game, but the offensive numbers are going to reflect a complete and utter domination by Michigan, and that's exactly what this game was. That's exactly what it was always going to be from the very start. Michigan is an extremely dominant team. To finish things off, folks, you better get ready for a lot of dominant performances. With teams like Indiana and Michigan State and Purdue rounding off the month of October, there is going to be a lot of this in the future, right? We had, 45-7 against Nebraska, and what was this, 52-10, I believe, against Minnesota. You're going to have a lot of 40 and 50 burgers against some of these teams because Indiana, it might be the worst team in the conference right now. You look at Michigan State, they're towards the bottom of the barrel. Purdue, we've looked at the struggles that they've had on the defensive side of the football. Boy, these next 3 weeks, these games could be over. And when we talk about depth for Michigan, I think this is another big key for them right now in terms of maybe the future more than anything, which could be a little bit scary, is you're seeing a lot of these second-teamers, these third-teamers get a quarter and a half, some of them 2 quarters of solid action. Game experience against Big Ten opponents is going to make this team even better, and it's going to make this team even deeper. I want to hear what you guys think about this matchup. How dominant do you think the Michigan Wolverines are right now? And what about the problems that are existing in Minneapolis, Minnesota? Leave your thoughts on all that in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.